Emma Dawson sat in the stillness of her kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The rain tapped against the window in a rhythmic lull, as if urging her to drown in its melancholy melody. She stared blankly at the misted glass, her reflection a pale ghost against the gray backdrop. It had been 6 months since her father's sudden heart attack, 6 months since the world she knew had crumbled. Her father, Henry Dawson, had been her anchor. His quiet wisdom and unwavering support had always been a guiding force in her life. When the call came late one night that he was gone, Emma had felt the floor drop out beneath her. Grief washed over her, but instead of finding solace in her husband Robert, she found a void. In the days after her father's death, Emma had looked to Robert for comfort. But he had been distant, distracted by work, and eventually she stopped asking for his support. Robert's job as a corporate lawyer demanded long hours, and lately, those hours had stretched well into the night. He came home late, missed dinners, missed moments. He missed her. The emotional distance between them, which she had once tried to ignore, had now become a chasm. Yet Emma clung to the idea that they were still a team, still a family. For their daughters, Lily and Grace, she pretended everything was fine. They were only 10, bright and full of life, and she couldn't bear to let her sadness seep into their world. So she bottled it up, smiled through the pain, and focused on keeping things together. It wasn't until she found the letters that everything changed. It was a gloomy Saturday when Emma finally worked up the courage to go through her father's belongings. His house, a cozy bungalow on the outskirts of town, had remained untouched since the funeral. Every visit there had been too painful, as if entering the space would make his absence all the more real. The house smelled of dust and old memories. Emma wandered through the rooms, running her fingers over the worn furniture, the photographs, the remnants of a life now closed. In her father's study, she opened a drawer she had never paid much attention to before. Inside, tucked neatly beneath old papers and books, was a small wooden box. She lifted the box, its surface smooth and cool, and opened it to find a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable on the envelopes. Margaret, her mother's name, was scrawled in his familiar script. Emma's heart ached as she pulled out the first letter. Her mother had passed away years earlier, and Emma had never known that her father had written to her. As she began to read, her chest tightened with emotion. "My dearest Margaret," the letter began, "I miss you even when you're beside me. Your presence is my greatest comfort, your absence my greatest sorrow." Each letter was a love note, written across years of their marriage, expressing a depth of emotion Emma had rarely seen in her father's reserved demeanor. He had adored her mother. Even after all those years, his love for her had never wavered. Emma read through the letters, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the realization that her parents had shared something so beautiful, so complete. When she finished the last letter, Emma felt an emptiness settle in her chest, a profound loneliness that went beyond the loss of her father. She had never had this kind of love with Robert. Their marriage had been built on practicality, on compatibility, but never on the kind of deep, soul-stirring connection her parents had. And now, it was as if she and Robert were two strangers living under the same roof. In the following days, the weight of those letters pressed heavily on Emma. She started to notice the cracks in her own life, with a clarity she hadn't allowed herself before. The way Robert barely looked at her when he came home, how his touches felt perfunctory, the way he avoided talking about anything meaningful. He was always somewhere else, either at work or lost in his own world. Emma began to wonder if he had already checked out of their marriage, and she had just been too blind to see it. One evening, she tried to talk to him. They sat at the dinner table, the girls already upstairs getting ready for bed. Robert was scrolling through emails on his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. "Robert," she said softly, her voice trembling with the vulnerability she felt. "Do you think we've grown apart?" He glanced up, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Emma took a deep breath. "I mean, us. It feels like we're not really connected anymore, like we're just going through the motions." Robert sighed, setting his phone down. "Emma, we've both been through a lot. I know I've been working a lot lately, but that's just life. Things will settle down. It's not just about your work, she pressed, her throat tightening. It's about us. I don't feel like we're partners anymore. Robert looked away, his expression hardening. I don't know what you want me to say. Things change. We're not in our 20s anymore. Emma felt the sting of his words. She had expected him to at least acknowledge her feelings, to show some sign that he cared about the growing distance between them. But his indifference only deepened her fear that something fundamental had broken between them. A few weeks later, while organizing the household finances, Emma stumbled upon a credit card statement that didn't make sense. There were charges for dinners at restaurants she had never been to, expensive gifts from shops she didn't recognize. Emma's pulse quickened as she stared at the statement, her mind racing. These weren't her purchases. Robert hadn't bought anything for her in months. So who were these gifts for? Her hands shook as she went through the rest of the statements, her heart pounding with dread. The pattern was clear: dinners, trips, and gifts that Robert had been hiding from her. A wave of nausea hit her as the realization sank in. Robert was seeing someone else. Emma wanted to confront him immediately, but fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation? But deep down, she knew the truth. Robert's growing distance, his late nights, the way he had stopped looking at her, it all made sense now. She decided to wait, to gather more proof before confronting him, but the betrayal festered inside her, eating away at the love she had once believed in. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Emma had taken the girls to a friend's birthday party. On a whim, she decided to stop by Robert's office to surprise him with lunch. She hadn't done anything spontaneous in years, and a part of her hoped it might rekindle something between them. As she walked through the gleaming glass doors of Robert's office building, she spotted him in the lobby. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, laughing at something he had said, her hand casually resting on his arm. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she watched Robert lean in and kiss the woman on the cheek, an intimate, familiar gesture that felt like a punch to the gut. She couldn't move. The scene played out in slow motion, and in that moment, everything shattered. The love letters from her father, the quiet distance that had grown between her and Robert, the suspicion she had been too afraid to confront, it all crashed down around her. Emma turned and left the building before they could see her, her heart breaking with every step. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Emma finally confronted Robert. Her voice was calm, too calm as she spoke. I saw you today, she said, her eyes locked on his face. Robert froze, his hand stilling as he loosened his tie. What are you talking about? I went to your office. I saw you with her. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. The silence between them stretched, suffocating in its weight. Then, finally, he sighed and sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. Emma, I'm sorry. There it was, no denial, no excuses, just the cold truth that she had dreaded. How long? She whispered, her voice trembling. 6 months, he admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor. Emma felt like the air had been knocked out of her. 6 months, half a year of lies, of betrayal, while she had been drowning in her grief. She had reached for him in her darkest moments, and he had turned to someone else. Why? She asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why didn't you just tell me? I don't know, he said, his voice hollow. Things just fell apart between us. I didn't mean for it to happen. Emma stared at him, the man she had once loved with her whole heart, and felt only a deep, hollow emptiness. There was nothing left to say. The marriage she had fought so hard to hold together was already gone. In the weeks that followed, Emma filed for divorce. Robert didn't fight her on it. The process was painful, messy, and drawn out, but she pushed through for the sake of her daughters. She leaned heavily on her therapist, Dr. Jameson, who helped her navigate the emotional minefield of betrayal and loss. One afternoon, during a particularly difficult session, Dr. Jameson asked her a question that stopped her in her tracks. Dr. Jameson leaned forward, her voice soft but direct. What do you want, Emma? Emma blinked, startled by the question. She had spent so long thinking about what her daughters needed, what Robert had done, what her father would have wanted. But no one, not even herself, had asked her that question in a long time. I don't know, Emma whispered, her voice shaky. I've been so focused on everyone else for so long, I don't even know who I am without them. Dr. Jameson nodded, her expression understanding. That's okay, but now might be the time to start asking yourself that question. What do you want for yourself, Emma, beyond being a mother, beyond being a wife? Who are you? The question echoed in Emma's mind long after the session ended. That evening, after she tucked Lily and Grace into bed, she sat in her living room alone, staring at the blank walls of her new apartment. It was small and unadorned, a far cry from the house she had shared with Robert, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she had a space that belonged only to her. Emma thought back to her childhood, before marriage, before children. She remembered the art classes she used to take in college. The way painting made her feel alive. She had abandoned it after she and Robert got married, telling herself there wasn't time for hobbies. But now, sitting in the quiet of her apartment, she realized how much she missed that part of herself. The part that created for the sake of creating. The next day, after dropping the girls off at school, Emma went to an art supply store. She hadn't picked up a paintbrush in over a decade, but standing in the aisles filled with vibrant colors and blank canvases, something stirred inside her. It was a small flicker of excitement, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She bought paints, brushes, and a canvas, and that afternoon she set up a makeshift studio in the corner of her living room. At first her strokes were hesitant, unsure. But as the colors began to blend on the canvas, Emma felt a sense of release, like the weight of the past months was melting away with each brushstroke. Weeks passed, and Emma began to carve out time for herself amidst the chaos of single parenthood. Painting became her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself and process everything she had been through. She painted late into the night after the girls were asleep, letting her emotions pour onto the canvas. The grief, the anger, the sense of betrayal, but also the quiet moments of peace she was starting to find. Her friends noticed the change in her. Sophie, her best friend since college, had been by her side throughout the divorce, offering support and shoulders to cry on. One afternoon, while they sat in Emma's apartment drinking tea, Sophie pointed to one of Emma's new paintings hanging on the wall. "That's beautiful," Sophie said. "I didn't know you were painting again." Emma smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "I didn't either, but it's been healing, I guess." Sophie studied her for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. "You seem different, Emma. Lighter, happier even." Emma hadn't realized it, but Sophie was right. The dark cloud of grief and betrayal that had hung over her for months was starting to lift. She was still healing, still figuring out her new life, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. One evening, a few months after the divorce was finalized, Emma attended an art show at a local gallery. It was something she hadn't done in years. Robert had never been interested in things like that, and over time, she had stopped going. But now, she was determined to rediscover the things that brought her joy. As she wandered through the gallery, admiring the pieces on display, Emma felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. She wasn't just a spectator anymore. She was an artist, too. The realization filled her with quiet confidence. Toward the back of the gallery, she noticed a man standing alone, gazing thoughtfully at a painting. He had dark hair streaked with silver and a contemplative expression. Something about him drew her in, and before she could second-guess herself, Emma walked over. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" she said, her voice tentative. The man turned to her and smiled warmly. "It really is. There's something so raw and emotional about it. You can feel the artist's pain, but also their hope." Emma nodded, her heart racing slightly. "I feel the same way. Art has a way of capturing all the things we can't put into words." He extended his hand. "I'm David, by the way." "Emma." She shook his hand, feeling a strange sense of ease. They chatted for a while, exchanging thoughts on the different pieces in the gallery. David mentioned that he was a writer, working on a novel about loss and redemption. Emma found herself sharing her own journey with him, her father's death, the letters, the divorce. To her surprise, it wasn't as painful to talk about as she thought it would be. Before they parted ways, David smiled. "It was really nice talking to you, Emma. I'd love to continue our conversation sometime. Maybe over coffee?" Emma hesitated for a moment. It had been so long since she had thought about the possibility of meeting someone new, of opening herself up to someone after everything that had happened. But as she looked into David's kind eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a spark of interest, a tiny flicker of excitement. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As Emma left the gallery that night, the rain had started to fall again, just like it had on so many nights over the past year. But this time, the rain didn't feel heavy or oppressive. It felt cleansing, like it was washing away the remnants of her old life, making room for something new. She walked home, her mind swirling with thoughts of the future. She didn't know what was going to happen with David, or with her art, or with anything, really. But for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was finally living for herself. She wasn't just Robert's wife or Lily and Grace's mother. She was Emma Dawson, an artist, a woman who had survived heartbreak and betrayal, and who was now on the path to finding her own happiness. And as the rain fell around her, Emma smiled, knowing that she had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The quiet storm that had raged in her heart for so long had passed, and in its wake, there was peace. Robert sat in the dimly lit apartment that had become his new home, the silence pressing in on him from all sides. The boxes were still unpacked, and the sleek, modern furniture he had chosen to fit his new life felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. He poured himself a drink and stared at the amber liquid swirling in the glass, trying to drown the gnawing feeling that had been eating away at him since the day Emma walked out of their marriage. At first, he had convinced himself it wouldn't affect him as much as it did. He had made his choices that, at the time, seemed justified. Life had grown mundane, the spark between them had faded, and he had allowed himself to be distracted by something new, something exciting. But as the weeks passed and he returned to an empty home night after night, he couldn't shake the dull ache in his chest that grew stronger with every lonely evening. The affair had ended soon after Emma filed for divorce. What had once felt like an escape from the routine became a constant reminder of what he had lost. The woman he had been seeing had nothing on Emma, nothing like her warmth, her quiet strength, the way she had always known how to make their home feel like a sanctuary. When the affair fizzled out, Robert had been left with nothing but regret. It was on a Tuesday evening, a few weeks after their divorce was finalized, that it truly hit him. He had gone to pick up Lily and Grace for the weekend, as part of their new arrangement. The girls had been staying at Emma's apartment, and when he walked inside, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Emma was painting. She sat by a canvas in the corner of the living room, her hair tied back loosely, her face illuminated by the soft light from the window. She looked peaceful, content, happier than she had been in years. Robert watched from the doorway, unnoticed, as their daughters played in the next room. His heart twisted in his chest. It wasn't just that Emma had moved on, but the realization that she had rediscovered a part of herself that he had never taken the time to appreciate. He had known she loved art when they first got together, but over time, it had slipped away, just like so many other things about her that he had stopped paying attention to. He remembered the way she used to look at him, years ago, with love and admiration in her eyes. That look had faded long before their marriage ended, and he had told himself it was just part of life, part of growing older. But seeing her now, lost in her painting, made him realize that she had never been the problem. He had been too consumed by his career, too focused on success and material things, to notice that the person who had truly mattered had been slipping through his fingers. That night, after dropping the girls off, Robert sat alone in his apartment, unable to shake the image of Emma's painting. He thought about the dinners they used to have, the quiet moments they used to share, the way she had looked to him for support after her father's death, and how he had failed her. He had pushed her away when she needed him most, distracted by work, by his own restlessness. He had convinced himself that their marriage was irreparable, but now, in the stillness of his own regret, he realized that it had been his own neglect that had driven her away. He had once been the man Emma loved, the man she trusted with her heart, but he had let that slip away, and now it was too late. Emma had found herself again, without him. She had found her strength, her joy, her creativity, and she no longer needed him to feel whole. And that was the hardest part for Robert to accept, that he had lost her, not to another man, but to the life she had rediscovered without him. As he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, Robert felt the weight of his choices settle over him like a heavy fog. He wished he could go back, to fix things, to be the man Emma deserved. But the truth was, he had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. Emma was gone, and the life they had shared was just a memory. His regret would stay with him, gnawing at him, a constant reminder of what he had lost by taking her for granted.